So I recently got myself a copy of none other than Thomas Sowell's Black Rednecks and White Liberals. And let me tell y'all something. This is required reading for every known and unknown being in the known and unknown universe. In every parallel dimension in the quantum realm, they need to be reading that damn book. If you want to understand what the hell we are currently seeing when it comes to the cultural zeitgeist, as they oftentimes say, where has this ghetto mentality come from? Why are these people so unhinged, unregulated? What is wrong with you people? Remember when you used to be able to say that and, it wasn't considered as some sort of hate crime? What is wrong with those people? That book right there answers that question down to a T. And so I thought, in the spirit of me actually thumbing through the physical copy of this book, let's go ahead and give our brother Thomas Sowell the spotlight he rightfully deserves. I feel like it's been too long since we have touched base with our good brother, Dr. Sowell. So let's go ahead and do that, shall we? Make sure to get yourself a little something to sip on. H to the Izzo, preferably, maybe a little tea. Nothing too extreme. A little sunshine, a little fresh air goes a very long way. Let's continue.
How important is this book to you?
Probably, it may be the most important.
I agree.
Because there are so many misconceptions about racial and ethnic issues that just straightening out the misconceptions is a major task in itself. I don't reach any kind of policy conclusions in this book because, as I say, it's just it's a full-time job to get the facts straightened out. I can write a column in a newspaper aimed at the general public, and there'll be extremely few misunderstandings of what I said. I can say the same things in a book that's aimed at intellectuals, and there'll be incredible twists and turning. Well, you seem to say this further than that. I remember one huge review trying to figure out the implications of ethnic America. And what made it a farce was that the last chapter of the book is titled Implications. So you don't have to guess what the implications I drew. They're right there. But I strongly suspect the person who wrote the review never got that far.
Black rednecks, who are they?
These would be blacks who came out of the Southern culture and who carried that culture with them north into the urban ghettos and into the ghettos of the South, for that matter. And who have not moved out of that culture since. Over the years, both blacks and whites have moved away from that culture. But in the poorest and worst of the ghetto areas, there are lots of people who have not. And these kinds, it's a culture which didn't do whites any good, and it's certainly not doing blacks any good today. And the tragedy is that people regard this culture as somehow the authentic black culture, and therefore you're not to interfere with it.
That needs to be tattooed on my forehead. It's seen as the original culture. Therefore, it is clung onto. Now, as you start to read the book, and I'm sure Dr. Sowell's going to get into this, but he explains how this is a culture that came from, the backwoods and back alleyways, the highways and byways of Old Britain, Scotland, and Ireland. Right? A lot of these sort of like the temperaments we see, the behavioral patterns, the violence, the promiscuity, the addiction, the lack of industriousness, or, the lack of building infrastructure, anything productive, laziness, short-sighted, pleasure seeking, all that sort of stuff was already there culturally, and then it was adopted. And then now it was owned. And that's been the most unfortunate and yet dangerous part, is like black folks believe that, that's us. Well, no, that's not you. But as you claim that more and more, and you justify that more and more, and it continues to perpetuate. And that's the part that truly gets me, is that it's one thing to think to yourself, that's a culture that's separate from my quote unquote blackness. But once you start tying something as out of your control as your race, that's when it becomes extremely dangerous. I'm black, I can't help that. Therefore, I must act in this way. You catch what I'm throwing? When you connotate a culture with a skin color, you're done for. I must act in those ways because I am black. No, You can act with some damn sense. But let us continue. This again, the only reason I'll stop, because I can listen to this man forever. The only reason I'll stop is because I really have something to say, and something is burning on my chest.
To be allowed to, until they're cheering people on. It reminds me of a scene in the Blue Max where this general is encouraging this daredevil pilot to do all kinds of wild stunts, you see, knowing that the guy's going to kill himself if he keeps doing this, and therefore the general will be rid of a political problem. Now, I don't think that the white liberals are doing this deliberately, but I think the net results are the same. They are cheering blacks on and doing things that are absolutely self-destructive.
What's the difference between a black redneck and a white redneck?
Color.
Same kind of people, same attitudes.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and same kind of results. One of the things I point out in this book is that as late as the First World War, when mental tests were given in the Army, there were whites from any number of southern states who scored lower on those tests than blacks from northern states. So that anyone who comes out of that culture is likely to score lower on mental tests, to do less well in intellectual areas, whether they're black or white. Among the middleman minorities, of which the Jews are the most prominent, the hostility to these people in countries around
you better
the world.
Watch it. Hey, old man Sowell, you better watch that. Don't you speak of them Jews. Oh, don't you speak of them nicely. They're going to call you Mossad. They're going to see that you're paid off by the governments, you see. Nah, you can't talk about them Jews unless they control the world. They control the banks. They control my bank account. The reason why my life is falling apart is because of the Jews. Nah, don't do that now. They're going to call you an agent of the Israeli government. Let's see where he goes with this. It's dangerous territory you're stepping into here, my man. Oh, Lord.
All proportion of that to any other kind of group I can think of. In terms of violence, the number of Chinese killed, let's say, in 1 year, and by mob action, exceeds all the blacks lynched in the entire history of the United States.
Let's run that back, because those type of points, no, we need to reiterate and instill that into your follicles. Hold on.
And minorities, of which the Jews are the most prominent, the hostility to these people in countries around the world is out of all proportion of that to any other kind of group I can think of. In terms of violence, the number of Chinese killed, let's say, in 1 year, and by mob action, exceeds all the blacks lynched in the entire history of the United States. And the number of Armenians killed in Turkey, during the First World War, is greater than that. And of course, the number of Jews slaughtered on a number of occasions in history, even before the Holocaust, is greater than that. So that the question is, why this particular kind of people are the targets of so much venomous hatred? And I think the answer is that they not only succeed, they succeed in a way which is a threat to the egos of other people. That is, no, you can envy a Rockefeller, but he's no threat to your ego, because you say, listen, anybody can be rich if he's born a Rockefeller. But the guy who comes here, let's say from Vietnam or Korea, and arrives.
This is the exact thing that takes place between black folk who see themselves as, of this land per se. FBA is what they call themselves now. Foundational Black Americans. They're in the fiber of American history. And I give that for sure. Versus many of the Africans who then move to the continent at some point in their life, or maybe their first gen, second gen, whatever, right? When you have this group of people who just got here, coming from these third world nations oftentimes, doing disproportionately better than this group of folks who've been here the whole time, there is a lot of envy and jealousy that is projected outwardly as just pure born hatred. You're not one of us. They call me a tether all the time, right? You're a tether. You can't do that. You don't understand. Blah, 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 blah. You don't understand our plight. You never. All of that. Instead of just saying, you know what? Let me take notes from the people who have done this right. And again, it's the very same thing when it comes to the Jewish community. Are there some who are menacing, deceitful, wicked? Absolutely. Just like there is in every single other demographic, period. But the reality is, because they're a small group who disproportionately has been doing better and better and better throughout time. Oh, they took over Hollywood. No, actually, they created Hollywood from scratch when they were taking on those shite jobs. They migrated like the rest of everybody else, the Italians, the Irish, etc. They move westward. They build an industry. They want to build influence and power just like every other group of people does. So why does nobody say, well, the Indians are controlling America? They're disproportionately doing better than everybody in America right now. Indian Americans, I'm not talking about Native Americans. I'm talking about Indian Americans. Punjab, them folks right there. I lived in the Bay Area. Them folks right there. I think per capita have the most millionaires at this point, per capita. Get to know the phrase. So yeah, it's real. It's easy. Well, those damn fill in the blanks taking all our opportunities. Oh, well, we can't do nothing for ourselves because they control everything. No, you control your life. You need to deal with your problems.
Year with little more than the clothes on his back and a few words of broken English. And a decade later, he has his own little business, and you see his son a few years after that getting ready to go off to Harvard or MIT. You got to ask yourself, you either got to, you've got to hate yourself for saying, my God, I've been stagnating. This guy was nothing, and now he's risen up. Or you're going to have to hate him. And most people, when they have a choice between hating others and hating themselves, they hate others.
Where does the hatred for the Jews come from in history?
Number of places, but they are people who have succeeded an awful lot in the midst of other people who have not. Years ago, one official of one of the Jewish organizations in New York asked me, what can Jews themselves do in order to minimize the hostility they face? I gave him a one-word answer: fail. Because as long as you succeed, you're going to be hated. Wow. Slavery was much bigger and involved infinitely more people than...
I heard this quote. It said, people love success until it happens to you. Like, we love the idea of success, but let it be somebody close to you, somebody you know that becomes successful, maybe even somebody you don't know. And all of a sudden, when it's embodied in a person, oh, there goes envy and hatred. But the idea of success, oh, yes, success. Oh, yes, we should strive for success. Let it happen to your sibling. That's when you know if you truly have that supportive spirit in you or you got a spirit of envy in you.
People have realized it was not confined by race. It was not defined by race or created by race. It existed for thousands of years. A history professor had a student come up to him and ask him, when did slavery begin? And he said, you're asking the wrong question. The question is, when did freedom begin? Because slavery existed as long as we have any records. And from archaeological finds, we realize that people were enslaving other people before they could read and write. So that's always existed, and it's existed all over the world. The number of white people enslaved by pirates in North Africa was greater than the number of Africans brought to the United States. And yet that's not even mentioned in much again. Because slavery existed as long as we have any records. And from archaeological finds, we realize that people were enslaving other people before they could read and write. So that's always existed, and it's existed all over the world. The number of white people enslaved by pirates in North Africa was greater than the number of Africans brought to the United States. And yet that's not even mentioned in most of the discussion. So I tried to look at slavery as a worldwide phenomenon, and it's something that's lasted for thousands of years. I also tried to ask the question, why did it end? It ended here because of a civil war, but it didn't end anywhere else because of that. It took over 100 years to root it out. And again, the literature, there's tons. You can find the shelves groaning with books about the United States, the Western Hemisphere, and Africans, but virtually nothing about the rest of it. This book about the Europeans enslaved by North African pirates came out in 2003. By 2004, you couldn't find a copy. It had, for all practical purposes, going out of print. There was just no interest in it. Racism in the United States grew out of slavery, but slavery didn't grow out of racism. The Europeans enslaved other Europeans for centuries before the first African was ever brought to the Western Hemisphere. That wherever there were people that were vulnerable for whatever reason, those were the people that were preyed upon. Even though for most of history, those who enslaved and those who were slaves were the same race.
In your opinion, what has to be done in the black schools or among...
So I do want to address that for a second. This narrative of they were chosen because they were black. It's a lie. They were chosen because, unfortunately, they were the ones who were on the market. transatlantic, coast to coast, from West Africa, why is it that you don't find the entirety of Africa? Because that right there was the most feasible. Now, could you have said, well, they were picking from the quote unquote best there was to pick? I would say yes. In the very same way every single other group of people did. They would not choose the weakling. They would not choose, the ones who couldn't carry forward these tasks. And again, this is the evil of slavery. No human being is a slave. It is a dark stain on anybody's history. It is a dark stain in the places that is currently going on right now that are unaddressed because we're still harping on this thing of, well, black people went through the worst racism because of slavery. He said something vital. He said it then came as a byproduct. So you then had, yes, some white folks who then started to see themselves as, well, these people are lesser than, and I am better than. And then you have black folks who started to retaliate in essence. And then after race became a business, after you could now not only be profitable, but become powerful by harping on this race issue that we see now more than I think any time in probably American history. And this is what the statistics show is, the better that race relations got or the more racism decreased, the more that it increased in the public eye, or at least in the media propaganda machine. So, yeah, I think everything has to be under interrogation. Everything has to be questioned. It's not to say that some things actually aren't true and all things aren't, like that nonsense. Oh, well, no, the moon landing, fake. Holocaust, fake. Fake. Slavery, fake. No. Many of these things were phenomenons, but let's get to actually know the reasoning behind them. And then how can we move forward and do better? That's how I view it, especially individually. That's the message that I always leave with. What do you do as the individual?
Black students in order to bring them up?
One, you get rid of the things that are dragging them down. You stop saying that
victim
speaking
mentality.
Black English, is just as valid and all that kind of stuff. It maybe is just as valid to linguists and so forth, but the fact is, if you talk that way, you're not likely to get into med school. You're not likely to do very much in your life.
If you were still living 50 years from now, what would you predict the black race in this country would be?
Oh, wow.
I mean, based on trends that you've seen in the last 20, 50 years.
It could go either way. If the current trends continue, it's going to be a disaster. But there's evidence that the current trends are not unchallenged. People from time to time ask me to mention some black conservative writers. And I tell them, 30 years ago, I could have told you Walter Williams and me. And today, I can't even keep track of them all. They're all over the place. They're in the media. They have their own shows. They write columns. They write books. And I learn about them, from nowhere. They suddenly appear. So there is this counter trend going on. And everything depends upon which wins out in the end.
I think that's a perfect conclusion point there, is to say, I do have hope. I hold out hope. I'm an optimist at heart. But I'm also a realist. And I know that change doesn't come as a natural, or at least progress doesn't come as a natural byproduct of change. Change is inevitable. Like, things are always going to constantly change. They say it's the only thing that is predictable in the known and unknown universe is change. So if we don't change it, meaning we live differently, the messaging changes. What we're willing to put up with and what we won't put up with changes. If that doesn't change, then it will not change. And as he says, it will devolve. And unfortunately, I think this was how long ago? God, does it have the date on here? I'm trying to see when this was. I do not see the date directly on the front. Is it? Like, my guess is that this was written in the 90s. So therefore, his promotion would have been in the 90s. I mean, yeah, the copyright 2005. I don't know if this was released in 2005, but let's just say 20, 30 years. Things have gotten drastically worse. If you just look at the overall culture, it's become more violent. It's become more promiscuous in just those two areas, right? Just to kind of give it a more surface level view. Less clothes, more guns. Less emotional maturity. more rap music, more 304 Streetwalker music, OnlyFans, you name it. The only thing that's going to correct, I believe, is the same thing that happens in our own individual lives, which is there is a cataclysmic shift. Something happens that changes everything. And unfortunately, more times than not, it is a tragedy or tragedies. And I really, truly pray that that's not the case. That people can make the decision before it essentially gets to, to where it's going. There's going to come a point, if it continues that way, that it would literally be extinction. Because it can't sustain. So I hope the best, but I know as far as me and mine, we will continue to live by truth. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. Now, if you'd like to stay around, make sure to click that little subscribe button down there, or you can show some love by going to the description below and clicking on the button titled Buy Me a Coffee. Leave a little something there, or click on the Cash App. Leave a little something here. Till the next time, peace.
I fell in love with the sunshine. I fell in love with the light. I fell in love with the full moon. I fell in love with the night. But I can see the light again. I can see the light. You can see the life in him illuminate the night. I know the time is taking. A 3-6-5, that's a full rotation. I see you looking up, you know them constellations. Constantly gazing like house of praises, you get to praising.